like,
We're live with Robyn,
someone.
and who, please toast us, Robyn. You're having a refreshing beverage.
Cheers. Yes. Oh man, my camera is totally off here. Yes, I am drinking Boda Box wine because I'm super classy. Did not cost $90, and I'm drinking it with ice, Diane Keaton style.
I think my rule of wine is drink what you enjoy. People tend to presume a sort of Fraser Crane-ness about me, which is not always that question.
You're a little bit.
Yes, it's whether I go nows or full Fraser. As I get older, I'm more full Fraser. I don't also faint at the sight of my own blood like now.
Yeah,
now classic scene. But
I
drink
probably do.
drink whatever you enjoy. I
Yeah,
think
no.
I want to be Fraser
Well,
Crane. That would mean that at some point I was married to BB Newirth.
See, I appreciate BB Newirth as she is a woman with a deep voice. One thing that I did appreciate, like when we first started doing this, is like several commenters were like, "I did not expect her voice to be that deep." So I feel a kinship with BB Newirth over, I guess, our surprisingly deep voices.
Yes, no one's commented on my voice, thank God. So I'm glad that. But yes, well, what I wanted to actually ask you about, if you kick off on, was obviously there was the Kyle Rittenhouse verdict this week, which was not surprising to a lot of people, still depressing. But what fascinated me was, I think Tim Miller at the Bulwark had commented about kind of this whole both sides thing of where the right, and we've actually seen it in our own comments, where it was like, oh, the left just wants this guy who shot two people in cold blood to go to prison forever. And it's like, I mean, okay. And then, but he used example of the right, like Republicans who were clearly embracing him, clearly, idolizing him. And you've had written about this. You know, not to get too far afield here, but Donald, if there's any question, Donald Trump had released a statement saying, obviously this is self-defense. There's no question. Whereas he has literally, had at his hate rallies called out the Black cop who shot Ashley Babbitt as she's literally breaking into the Capitol. And he was like, there's no reason. Like, well, wouldn't he? There's a literal mob, and he warned the person, and he's a cop, and he's legally able to hold a gun, and he shot someone, but that's not self-defense. She was wrongly murdered. But the
thing is, they know, like, one thing I will say about the right is that they absolutely know that they are like completely full of shit. Like, that's not like, they know they know that they have double standards for their people in general. Like, they know, and they do it anyway because they know that they'll get away with it, and that's really all that matters to them.
Whereas you are a consistent person of like, I don't think anyone should be shot down by deranged people. And you had so Tim Miller on the left, so all the stuff on the right, but his both sides balance on the left was, again, Congressman Presley saying again that he's perhaps a bad guy who shot two people in what looks like cold blood. And then he said Wonkette labeled him a homicidal maniac. And I had trouble finding the headline because he had taken it out of context in the clip he showed. It was just that homicidal maniac and then the Wonkette label. But you had written about this again. It was an article about the right idolizing
over him.
Yes. Could you describe that article and the headline, if you could recall it? Because I believe it was like Teen Dream. It was clearly
it was just like, right wingers, wingnuts swoon over teen dream / homicidal maniac Kyle Rittenhouse. And it was just like one of the general rundowns of like them saying, to my recollection, it was just a rundown of them like being very hyperbolic in their enthusiasm towards him. Which
yes,
is, you know,
it was not necessarily you bashing the homicidal maniac as the implication. It was basically, it's
it was
clear
a joke.
it was a joke. And this happens to us often where people will act as if we're Salon or Slate and we'll take our headlines, which are kind of our attempt at oniony style Daily Show jokey
Yeah.
things. Headlines are rarely meant to be,
Know when shit is a joke. They
yes.
know. They're just disingenuous. I refuse to give anyone any leeway anymore on this shit. Like, I'm done. I'm done. People know when things are jokes. People know when they can take things out of context and make them seem like, oh my God, this person is totally overreacting to a thing that they're clearly just making a joke about. And this from the people who are like, oh, the left is killing comedy always. Like, no, we're not killing comedy. You're just bad at it. And apparently only get comedy from 40 years ago.
It's a crazy both sidesism if it's really
Yeah.
Congressman Presley and Robyn as
Mm.
the side of the people
You know
who are
what? Good company,
very
right?
good
Like,
to be in. You know, I don't know if we should worry about all these defamation suits. It's fascinating because Fox, because Republicans never give up on, they never take the win. You know,
mhm.
liberals are often like, we won, but maybe we should share our win because then if we enjoy our win too much, people will hurt us. Republicans, like I always quote the Social Network, the line where the guy's like, I'm not coming back for 30%, I'm coming back for everything, because that's how they act. It's like, we're okay, well, now he should sue everyone. And I kept thinking, yes, like all those successful defamation suits OJ Simpson had against Norm Macdonald and Charles Grodin
Yeah.
and CNN, like everyone who, this idea, and I love your opinion on this because it's like, to me, I always think of the Simpson trial because everyone obviously brings it up as if that's the only kind of case of injustice. But
Yeah, of someone getting away with some shit. Like, that's the only time it's happened.
but he the OJ Simpson's life as he knew it was over. All that changed was he was
Yeah.
not going to spend the rest of his life in prison. But Tucker Carlson is going to have Rittenhouse on his show Monday. Rittenhouse is going to get this documentary. There's perception from half the country, most people, that he is innocent and has been vindicated, even though he was on camera shooting. There was no sense for OJ of like, oh, well, the jury system has spoken. He obviously didn't kill these people. He's been found not guilty, and he's going to get around to finding the real killers. And now he's going to go on Jay Leno's show. Like he was a pariah.
Yeah.
The perception, and anyone you ask, anyone would speak, was he murdered people. He got away with it. And we don't want anything to do with him. And yet now it seems the opposite for Rittenhouse, like he's getting internships or something.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, that was going to happen anyway. It was going to happen anyway because they decided that he was, their teen dream. That is what happens to people on the right when they go and murder a bunch of people and get away with it. I'm not surprised by that at all. And as far as like pretending that they think that like, oh, well, that means he's clearly 100% innocent, to the left, they're full of shit. Again, they're disingenuous. Like they're not being sincere.
Yeah. I mean, again, like OJ's life was over. Like it's over. He was a pariah. He doesn't get to go back to make Naked Gun films. The people.
Weren't there any more Naked Gun films after that though?
I don't keep that much track. Maybe because OJ wasn't available. He was he was the what kept the whole humor going.
Yeah.
But he lost everything. There was a sense of justice in that because he lost what would have mattered to him. Nothing compared to two people dying. And then but this idea that he was like, you can that we just have to, America has to accept these verdicts and you're
Yeah.
embraced is totally disingenuous. It is not how life works. And it's one thing to be disingenuous, but they're often disingenuous in the same.
It's sort of ridiculous to pretend that like our judicial and criminal justice system is like super great at getting it right. Like that is ridiculous, and that is actually why I'm, generally it's one of the reasons I'm really opposed to incarceration in general. Like they don't our system does not get it right. Our system was not really designed to get it right. Our system was generally designed to protect the right people.
Oh, absolutely.
Like,
And I want to latch on to what you just said there because it's very good. But I would one quick thing about the Simpson case that I also want to compare that it frustrates me because Simpson again is not some random white guy. It was the idea of if you want to remove race, is that you can become rich enough to buy off, rich and famous enough, and have enough goodwill for you.
But it really wasn't, because at the end of the day, like there was still like that sense like, oh, he got away with something he shouldn't have gotten away with.
Absolutely. And he didn't declare, I've written about this somewhat elsewhere, but it's not like he declared self-defense and we would laugh, right? In retrospect, he just said, I didn't do it. There's actually no videotaped evidence, as in with Rittenhouse, of him doing it. And it's not like he wasn't rich enough to basically
there was a certain amount of resentment because he's like, at the end of the day, he may be super rich and everything, but he's still not really who the system is designed to protect.
Yes, he did not actually go. He did not basically go in the stand, cry, and say, I went to confront my ex-wife when I probably shouldn't have been at her house. I went to confront my ex-wife. Her boyfriend went crazy on me, and I had no choice but to kill him. I felt my life was at risk. And then she went crazy and got angry when I killed him. But even though I killed a person, I was still feeling like maybe she was going to kill me, and she scratched me and that hurt. So I had to kill her. And that's self-defense. That's absurd. Like the idea, like that's not an argument that would have worked. He would have been convicted even with that jury. And that is what happened with Rittenhouse, where he's basically like, I shouldn't have been here. Things went out of hand. People got real mad when I shot someone in front of them and tried to stop me. And then I shot some more people because he's not a cop. Like, what is that supposed to mean? So what does this mean? If you see someone shoot me and you're like, oh my God, like I should do something. I'm going to try to hit him with a skateboard. And like the person's like, oh, Robyn's coming at me with a skateboard. And she seems to be very mean because she just saw me shoot someone.
Because I called a guy who killed 2 people a homicidal maniac. That's how they knew.
But,
oh man.
You talk about like the system and how it works. Because I think what happens is, something else I mentioned is that it frustrates me more. Like, I'm not as upset when conservatives are awful about this, right? It actually frustrates me more when the left, and often white liberals or moderates, are sort of institutionalists among the left who kind of go, well, this, either trying to defend the system, either it's, the system is what it is, and we need to embrace the system no matter what, or the idea of like, well, here's how. It's so hard to, and it happened with Zimmerman. Man, it's really hard to convict people. Really? I don't know. So you understand that Black people are disproportionately. Do you just think so? Republicans say that that they hate Black people. What you're saying is that apparently we're just killing people. We're just killing motherfuckers in broad daylight, and like, and I'm guilty. Please arrest me. And these Keystone Cop, prosecutors are able to do something about it, because then they list, oh, it's so hard, can't get past self-defense. It's like, okay, well, can you please provide all the Black people who have killed someone claim self-defense, and the prosecutor?
There are so many domestic violence victims who are in prison right now who actually were acting in self-defense. Like that.
Haven't they used that against them in those cases? Like they say, like it's premeditation because
Yeah.
I beat you up 5 minutes ago, so
Mhm.
you've decided to murder
Mhm.
me. Which
Yeah.
also that whole logic would apply to what happened to Rittenhouse. It's like, oh, I need to kill everyone who's going to come after me because otherwise they're going to try to capture me. So it was like not at all consistent with actually how our laws work.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things that like completely went up my ass was the people going, well, the people who care about criminal justice reform should actually really be happy about this result. And here's why. Because you want more people to be found innocent and you want fewer people to go to prison. And that is true. But like,
there was
that's
probably
some bullshit. Like, I
like
mean,
black people convicted of similar crimes with like gang members who I presume could
mhm.
argue self-defense certain cases, like, or that they were
Well,
standing there.
also, I mean, gang members, they count you as a gang member if you, like, in passing, spoke to a gang member when you were 13. And
Yes.
that's actually how they do those stats.
And the
Which,
law is able to permit that and label you as criminal, whereas the law was structured so that Rittenhouse could not be labeled a member of a militia, which could be, if you the big book of the source, a
yeah.
gang. But
Oh, it's
that is,
absolutely a gang. Like,
that gang is part of free association, and so white guys with guns freely associating, that's the Constitution. But
yeah.
black teens freely associating in certain neighborhoods are gangs. So it's a naming
And I will
convention.
tell you, you know that I have a weird take on this. I think that in like not every case, but in some cases, I understand. Like in many cases, I understand why people, do that shit because the police aren't protecting them. The police aren't protecting their families. Like, you know, that is what happens if
Well, that's the implication. There's an area of where the first in those neighborhoods, the police exist for containment. We are
Mhm.
meant to contain you, occupied, to keep you from coming.
Infiltrating the suburbs.
Yeah, in the good neighborhoods and hurting him. But like, if there's a crime, and Richard Pryor joked about it, others joked about it, you forget getting the only way you're going to get, cops or an ambulance in the ghettos to call up and say a white
Yeah.
lady was killed or something, and maybe they'll
I
show
mean,
up.
quite frankly, a protection racket works better than the cops do in some cases.
Yes. Well, I mean, you're not supposed to actually ever say that there's anything with the cops that I mean, it's. I've been a bit cynical about this. I comment of like, not that there's no good from activism or protest, but it just seems like for whatever reason, my sense from the past year is that certainly most Democrats wish that George Floyd, not in the sense of no one should want that George Floyd had died or been murdered, but would love
Mhm.
that this never happened. There, I think in rooms, if they believe that there'd been if Floyd hadn't been murdered, no protest, they would have marched to a complete wonderful victory against Trump and Republicans in 2020, because they never would have had to talk about racial injustice or police reform, which are things that they
Mhm.
can run and hide from. And so the sense of, to me, it's like, well, not in a conspiracy theory sense, but like in an X-Files, the idea would be, hey, we're behind in the polls. Why don't we just have a cop kill someone? There'll be protests because no one likes when someone gets murdered in broad daylight in their neighborhood. And we will, of course, always we'll send our cops in to then provoke the protesters. It'll be
Mhm.
violent TV. And of course, we'll politically benefit from it because it seems as if the Republicans politically benefited from the unrest,
Yeah.
that went
I
on.
mean,
And
there's literally nothing that I would put past cops and or Republicans. Like, I mean, absolutely nothing. I mean,
yeah,
look
I
at what
mean,
just
I'm
happened with
obviously
the
not.
two very obviously innocent guys who just got out of prison um, for the assassination of Malcolm X, who like the guy who actually did it was like, no, these people weren't involved for years.
Yeah, I mean,
years.
apparently,
Like,
like somehow it's too much paperwork to free the people.
yeah.
One happens always like, well, you need to get them out. Like, even if it's the middle of the night, go and get out the person who is clearly did not commit this crime. This is
Mhm.
weird, crazy sense of like, oh, someone else has confessed, and
I
it's
I actually firmly believe that the U.S. justice system does not give a fuck if people are innocent, and it really doesn't. Actual innocence is not, in fact, a reason to let someone out of prison. Like, there have been Supreme Court cases. A person actually being innocent isn't like a "hey, let me out of prison" situation, which is why we literally have people in prison right now who other people have confessed to not only confessed to the crimes that they're in prison for, but have gone to prison for those crimes and been let out in the time that, and they're still in prison. There's
well, it's
really not a big give a fuck when it comes to innocent or guilty. There's just a general sense, I think, that like it's supposed to make people feel satisfied
oh,
in a way
absolutely.
and make people feel safe.
Well, it's like
Um,
a black person who watches The Fugitive, and you're like, well, he's gonna, wouldn't he do another 20, 30 years for multiple crimes he's already committed? But that is that sense. Most people have that idea, right? That like, okay, well, I'm innocent, so I should be released, or I'm innocent of this crime, so if I go on this movie's adventure
yeah,
to prove my innocence, clearly you're not gonna. That would be unjust. And it is unjust, right? Like, okay, well now,
but if
even
the
though
fugitive was black, he might not be found guilty of that particular crime, but he would be found guilty of being a fugitive and
yes,
then end up going to prison
yeah,
anyway.
you stole a car, you punched a cop, you fled the state. Here's the third. But I was
That's the one-armed man one, right?
I'm sorry.
That's the one-armed man one, right?
Yes, the one armed
I've never
man.
actually seen it. I've just seen people joke about it. Sorry.
Oh yeah, my mother and I loved the TV show with the original black and white TV show. I think color for one season. I love that, which it was the sense of there's a whole kind of in television so many shows of a man like traveling, like somehow this is sort of a
Hmm.
man traveling back, the government after them, and
Hmm.
then usually at some point meet a woman and they fall in love, but and then they, have sex the next and we can't have a relationship because the bad guys are after me, so now I have to leave. You can make of that what you will of what men like, oh wow, maybe I could just say the next morning, it's like, I
Yeah.
love you, but I'm on the run. I'm a convicted murderer. And we
I mean,
still
been there.
so yeah, I mean, there is a sense of institutionalism that is very depressing to see. And, I think Republicans do speak to the emotionalism of kind of these issues. And I think that's, to me, the common factor. So if we think about the Virginia election and what
Hmm.
happened there, it's like, okay, well, there's one candidate who's saying, you guys are really pissed and I
Yeah.
hear your anger and I'm going to do something about it. And there's another candidate who's like, things aren't so bad.
Everything's fine. You're
And,
all happy, right? Things are cool,
and
right?
candidate
Pretend
loses.
things are okay.
And that candidate loses.
Yeah.
I would say that was a challenge for Hillary Clinton, that 2016 was very much,
It was
and,
a year where people wanted change. Like, people were
and they were angry
really
and
just
pissed
done
off.
with some shit and mad about some things. And, nope, we're just going to keep everything as it is. That'll be fine with all of you. And you will be okay with, yeah,
Right? Yeah. And that no one seems to respond that way. And I'd seen
yeah.
somewhere on Twitter, and it's often in reaction to anger that's happening. And it
Hmm.
goes back, and I've mentioned this before, Occupy Wall Street, there was
Hmm.
that anger, and everyone's like, chill out, calm down. And then Donald effing Trump comes in and grabs the same rage and rides
Yeah.
that to the White House. But again, it was like when people were frustrated, there's a sense of, okay, well, democracy is slow and takes time, and it's like, okay, well
Yeah.
now you're literally sound like the person that Nina Simone was screaming at in Mississippi, goddamn. Like they tell us to be
Yeah.
slow. It's like, okay, well, how much of my time do you want? As James Baldwin said, like this whole concept, it's usually, upper class white people who are saying this will take time, and like, okay, well, I've got
Because they want it to take time. Like
I've got a
they would
finite.
like to be dead and gone by the time that change happens.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but like that's usually the case, especially the economic change. Like they're like, oh, that's fine as long as I'm dead and gone and my kids have already inherited all my money. Like, then change, totally go and do that. Absolutely.
Same with
Like,
slavery. Like we're supposed to give Jefferson points for saying maybe slavery can end when I'm dead and no longer can have slaves. Just like,
yeah.
huh? Well, okay. Like now I just think that you're not only a slave owner and a horrible person for owning slaves, but you're kind of mean to the next generation of slave owners that you won't share your slaves. You just want to like have them now, and then like, okay, well, when I'm dead, maybe we'll think about it. But Eric Swalwell had tweeted after the um, verdict of like, okay, we have to march to the ballot box. Oh my God. This is gonna make another one of those. So generally what happens, for those of you who are tuning in, if you go to these lives and screenshot randomly, I look awful, and then Robyn will always have some sort of kind of cool expression of humor. I think there was another one where it looked like you were kind of like this, and I looked like I was like, no comment, insider trading. Like
I know I am overly expressive. Like you have no idea. Like my hands are going crazy down here. Like I'm a freaking drama queen. What can I say? Like.
So, and the thread, I don't know if you saw it. Hers was like, we're gonna, I think it was Jessica Ellis, friend of mine.
Oh yeah,
and she was.
I love her.
Yeah, she's great. And she said, "Well, you guys are in charge of the government. What are you talking about? You're literally telling that there's nothing you can do until the next election. Like have the mark." And of course, the people who don't like the quote unquote do something towards got upset about it.
Like, I mean, I was also discussing that on the Twitter machine with Parker Malloy, who had a really good thread. We're also IRL friends. She is awesome, in case anyone was wondering.
Yeah, she's great. I'm a big fan of her.
Like, love her guts. But like, she was telling him and everyone was telling him, you have to actually, like, some of it is on you. Like, you have to play some amount of hardball with your coworkers. Like, and we need that. We need them to be like, hey, I mean, as AOC actually said in the interview with the New York Times, like, hey, guess what? We're not actually going to, we won't support your bills. We will, play hardball otherwise. We will support your primary challengers. Like, make there be consequences for both Sinema and Manchin. Like, they need consequences. They're doing what they're doing because it's working for them, and they're getting piles of freaking money from GOP donors, like,
and Democrats. And to your thought, like when Swalwell had responded to Jessica with the idea of like, well, we don't control the government, which is untrue. Not only is it untrue, Republicans think you do. So basically you're demoralizing Democrats, saying we're not in control, but you're not actually helping people who won. The vaunted swing voters think you're in control and like are going to hold you accountable for failing. But it's like, well, we only have 50. Well, you are in control. Well, and if you're not in control and can't do anything, like,
like, get your own damn people together is what people, like, honestly, like a person on the outside looking in is just going to say like, oh, so you can't convince people in your own party to vote for your shit. Like, oh, cane someone on the Senate floor. I don't know how high.
I showed that to you. Well, to me, to go back to
That's a little kinky.
If the message is that we are not in control, why aren't we in control? Because of Manchin and Sinema, who won't agree and who are probably coverage for other institutionalists who won't get rid of the filibuster to pass voting rights. If that's why you're not in control, that needs to be your message. Because what they're then saying is vote harder, which to me makes me feel like old boxer from Animal Farm. I will work harder. And next time I'm going to wind up in the glue factory. Like that's what you're saying to Black voters. Hey, vote harder, because they're already passing voter suppression bills, insane gerrymanders where you can't win. Like literally states like North Carolina, like almost all the congressional districts are going to be for easily Republican, even though Trump, like it was a coin toss. It was like within a point and a half, but it's not going to be that, on and on and on. And, if you say, well, we have no leverage, there's nothing we can do with Manchin and Sinema. If that's true, then why are you Manchin is called Mr. President on the Senate floor?
Yeah. Because he gets to decide everything. And that's pretty freaking gross.
Yeah, and Sinema gets to make this big speech about how bipartisanship is great, which is obviously counter to the Democrats. Like Democrats, if Cori Bush is alone in her apartment in the middle of the night and whispers, defund the police, that apparently is why we're going to lose the House. But Kyrsten Sinema, basically in front of the presidential podium talking about bipartisanship and our roads, bridges, proves we can work together with Republicans.
I'm sorry, but fucking imagine if any of the squad showed up in a freaking party wig. Like that would be that. Oh my God, heads would explode. Like they would fall down. There would be fainting all over the place.
It's a Republican doubles. They're defending her, and they're defending her from a position of whiteness. I think it was, of course, Hassan, who's a Democrat, but Murkowski and Collins. Presley does not. Now, Presley would never be permitted, and she's around the same age, a little bit. Around the same age as Sinema, would be permitted to. She is fierce, but fierce, and a Black woman knows she has to be fierce this way professionally. And this idea, Murkowski, these women know they're lying, that there's no way, like the whole kind of what we consider, mostly because I think these women, it's quite possible these white women have no concept of what quirky and cool for Black women is, because the only way a Black woman gets in their sphere is when we're wearing every possible uniform of like acceptability. But like Presley, Presley basically had to say, I have a medical condition. That is why my hair is shit.
Which I have, honestly, like I have a couple friends who have that condition, and I've known a couple people who have that, and like I have like such admiration for her going and doing that, because I just know like what women have been through who have alopecia and everything, and so I freaking love her for that so much. Like
absolutely,
and she's not doing it to be like, oh, I'm super cute and quirky Zooey Deschanel, who, just to be clear, I've had this haircut since I was like 5 years old. Zooey Deschanel stole my haircut, and I did change it during the years of her prominence. It wasn't good, and I went back to my normal haircut.
Yeah, well, I think there's rooms for bangs for everyone. But yeah, Presley could not have said, I'm just shaving my head, or, on the fact of, I think, and I haven't obviously can check this, but there's very few women with natural hair.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Like there's all these things. AOC, who's, when she went into Congress, like very young, late 20s, clearly was always dressing more professionally than Sinema, and who never got credit for it. She would then get,
and people were like, oh my God, goodness, she's wearing red lipstick. like a hussy. Like people were actually freaking out over her red lipstick, which by the way is like awesome. I forget what it is. It's Steel is something or another. But like she looked awesome. She looked fantastic. And people were still like gasping all over the place, like, oh no, that's unprofessional. Like no matter what she did.
So this defense of cinema is kind of frustrating. Her sense of hiding behind. You've written about this when she was like, "Oh, they're reading my body language because I did this." I was a well, no, because generally, like you did a cartoon movie villain thing. Like, I'm sorry, like people respond to similar to like, I mean, Cruella DeVille is not sexist that we don't like someone who wears puppy clothing. Like there's sense of like it's you're just judging my wardrobe. It's like, okay, well, it's kind of bad. You're a bad person. So although my son loves Cruella because he loves the most recent Cruella movie.
Yeah, no, she's very glamorous.
He adores her. He somehow has a whole thing in his head why she's not the person in the movie who kills the puppies.
Well, I mean, I hate to say it, like this is not a defense of Cruella DeVille, but like, the fact that we don't kill Dalmatian puppies for their fur is an entirely cultural thing, because it's like, oh, they're adorable, so it's bad, but like, and I say this as a person who definitely does own a certain amount of leather. Like it's like, oh well, cows, they're not quite cute enough. Like I'm totally not a vegan, but like I find that a little hypocritical, frankly.
You can wear leather, you can wear this.
But oh no, cute puppies. I also don't understand like why sorry, off topic, but like why she needed puppies specifically. Like puppies aren't gonna, like, you might as well just get like grown ass dogs and like
maybe
you can have fewer of them.
Softer. It's like the difference between
like calf skin or still.
Not
she was asking the prince.
I have not researched this. I am not someone who would wear puppy skin. But
no, I would not wear puppy skin either. I'm just saying, like.
But my sense is that look, if like Swalwell is going to make this claim that, oh, woe is us, we can't help you, we're defenseless, you need to help us elect more people, even though that's very difficult. Republicans are actively making it difficult. So, but we can't pass voting rights. You need to single out the people who are stopping you from nuking the filibuster to kill voting rights and present them as the enemies of that, instead of you've done the exact. I mean, again, Kissinger and Cheney are completely marginalized. Now, while the MSNBC crowd might love them, they are they're not welcome in Republican circles now.
Yeah.
And they support the Republican agenda, but they kind of made a stance. Manchin and Sinema are the most powerful people in the Democratic Party. And so in the sense that politicians are self-serving, and I've asked this online and people are like, no, Connor Lamb and if Tim Ryan would win, they'll be team players. I was like, well, why? Why would I? You've not punished.
I think it's pretty clear about the fact that they would not be, like, especially Connor Lamb. He's like, no, I'm basically going to be a Republican. It'll be great.
Why wouldn't I? But why wouldn't you and I, based on what we saw, if we were running for Senate, why wouldn't we say we're going to align ourselves with the powerful people, the ones who can't be counted on? Because the team players, Warnock is going to lose his seat. Thank you, Kristen Sinema. Mark Kelly probably will as well. But Mark Kelly, George Hickenlooper, you don't even know these people's names. Like they aren't as powerful as so Sinema has not suffered. She has, as she said, pretty much GOP will give me tons of money. Big donors give me tons of money. I will sell my vote, and the Republican and Democrats will enable it. Will let me make this big speech, make a big thing, and
they will let her be like the bipartisan queen. Is the thing, like, they'll still vote for her shit that she wants for her state or for her, agenda, because oh no, we don't want to be seen as like blocking things. No, block every single thing that bitch wants to do, like everything.
You should.
That's difficult for her.
That's consistent with your message. The message of like, to me, it's like whenever Democrats fail to excite, so like the youth vote doesn't turn out, or minority vote turn out in sufficient numbers, they're like, well, you need to, because the Republicans are fucking monsters, they're fascists, you've got to come out and turn out. And then it's like, okay, well, but Kirsten Sinema just gave this big speech about bipartisanship and how you can work together, and that doesn't, why are you building roads with monsters? Like, because I would presume that in Nazi Germany they had roads, and in communist, in the Soviet Union they had roads and bridges, but they were inherently other things problematic with those regimes. So why are you working with a clearly anti-democratic, especially when Sinema's like, we can do this and it's wonderful, but then she doesn't call out.
And also, it's only good when Republicans want things, but also Republicans are an existential threat. Vote for us. But this is
good. The system works. Saying the system works is like not going to help you when your argument to disaffected voters, and when there's enthusiasm gap, is to then say, well, you have no civic duty, you need to come out. And which to me also, why are you at this point, after what happened in Virginia, your problem isn't that young people don't beat up on David Hogg or these other young people who like you need to like, they at least aren't voting against you. So the folks who stay at home, your problem is these white ladies who are voting, who are flipping. And I'd written about this with the Max Boot article about the Sister Soldier moment, which is so gross and annoying. But someone had responded of like, well, you're blaming white women. Why not white men? White men didn't vote. Well, one, yes, I hold white men accountable for supporting fascists, sure. But I would presume that
white women have more to lose, like, or are supposed to.
I presume that the McCullough campaign and Democrats understand that they will lose white men by like 60-40.
Yeah.
That's consistent. When they saw that exit poll number, they were like, okay, we're still on path to win because, Northam lost white men.
Yeah.
Biden
but like, this is like, McCullough was supposed to be a Northam. Like he was supposed to be like, oh, hey, like his whole job was to appeal to like the white suburban women. And he failed.
Yes,
like that is like,
that's what you were supposed to do, and you failed. And yes, like the white guys, that was not part of your strategy. Your strategy was he actually lost white men by about as much as he would have expected to, right?
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit more. The reason he lost is because it's sort of like asking me, why aren't you blaming white men for why he lost, would be like when Trump lost saying, when there's the autopsy after Romney, it's like, oh, black voters didn't vote for you. It's like, well, we knew that. The problem is that this demographic didn't. And there's that whole plan of like, I mentioned Jennifer Carroll Foy, who I thought would have been great. First governor of Virginia, black lady, single mom, have been great history here. And someone's like, oh, well, we've got to have those white voters. We need to do. And it's like, how much worse could she have done than McAuliffe? Like, would she have had, obviously, she could not have done worse. And that often winds up being the case, right? It's like, well, how much worse could it get when you're already at 37 or 38%? And now you're saying, okay, well, we need the youth vote. We need him to be as popular with young people as the Beatles, and in the mid 60s, he needs that, and he needs.
But also screw young people because they don't vote, and we don't care if they vote for us or not. So there, like, here's my thing: if you're gonna be like, our whole thing is built around appealing to white women in the suburbs, that is like, fine. If that's your tactic, fucking be good at it. Like, actually be good at it, because I don't see them actually being good at it. Like, and every single time, like, for the most part, when Democrats win elections, It's because of Black people coming out. It's because of people of color coming out. It's because of young people coming out. And it's, sure, some, like, I guess people are like, well, if it weren't for white suburban women, Biden would have lost. And like, I get that there is probably something they're looking at that I'm not. But at the same time, it doesn't hurt to also have the votes from your base and from like the people that you consider the people who are supposed to vote for you.
Well, the coalition 2020 was very weak, right? Because
Yeah.
it was very Trump focused. So suburban women, you then could leverage what they were angry about. Again, it's all about I'll show this again. The guy has the cover, the idea of you are very upset with Trump. Suburban women did not like them. They were able to leverage that. Here, that's an anger they were kind of willing to leverage. The anger, McAuliffe was sort of like, how long could I ignore this issue? Because that's a common thread, right? Like Republicans lie. Frank Luntz was like, man, well, Democrats need to stop fixating on these social issues and which they don't. They run away from them. And it was Republicans, it was Democrats who were rolling their eyes saying, why are you worried about Dr. Seuss or this or cancel culture? And we have, and it was Joe Scarborough.
Or 85 words, like terms that you can't actually define.
But the idea is that there is anger there. Republicans have a system for stoking that anger. Anger will trump everything swell.
Oh, absolutely.
So you need to either
the assumption is that like white suburban women don't have anger about anything and therefore are like prime pickings for people who don't actually want to do anything. And I realize that I'm currently in a suburb and I am, a white woman, but I don't actually know. It's actually kind of sad I don't know anyone here anymore. But like I don't know what they want. So like and I don't know that they're entirely non-controversial and have entirely like bland opinions on everything. So they should probably study those people more if that's who they want to attract.
Yeah, I mean, Spanberger's whole like, no one cares, and she won't be in Congress for long. Which is actually the interesting thing about gerrymandering is that you're going to wind up with a Congress of Getz, Green, Bulwark, but then also the squad, and then like the kind of mealy middle vanishes. And not that I would even consider Kissinger and Cheney the middle, but they're also jeopardized. So you're going to have what's deemed extremists on either side. One would argue that as long as there's extremists, there's a benefit in having other extremists on the left who at least will recognize the fight, because it just winds up being people who, like Chris Murphy in Connecticut, who has Republican friends, and he doesn't understand why these Republicans are so mean. And I think what happens is like, well, the reason that these Republicans you work with are so terrible is because your family and friends are Republicans, want them to be terrible, but they won't recognize that. And that becomes this challenge of like being unable to fight the battle. But, look, the anger.
You have to fight the battle on various fronts. Like in AOC's New York Times interview, she was like, hey, no one came to me and said, hey, like, get in touch with your people, re like the McAuliffe campaign. They were just like ready to blame her for things not going well for them. But like, if she had like used her, she's like, use me. Young people like me better than they like your ass. So like, I'm happy to help. Ask me to do that instead of just blaming me for like screwing things up for you in the Real Housewives of what is in Virginia? I don't know.
Well, I saw a thread. I saw a thread about the AOC interview, and of course, there's a media crash of, well, she's not popular among young people, which is more of like head in the sand. I don't know how to address, like, you don't want this to be. It kind of like.
I don't want it to be true, therefore it's not true.
So whatever, fine. So she's she's not popular, or Lauren Underwood connects more with, okay, whatever you want to believe. I can't argue with you on this. They didn't actually bring Lauren Underwood in either. They brought in no one young. What about, they did bring in Stacey Abrams, but that was the other sense. Well, Stacey Abrams is arguably, that's a sense of the party finds her acceptable at this point, more so than AOC, although she is just as polarizing. And it's like, well, it's polarizing in a different way.
Oh yeah, on the right, they hate her guts.
Obama is loathed by Republicans. It's like, well, no, he's not hated by swing voters. It's like, are you sure?
Yeah.
Like, well, he's not. She would have alienated swing voters. And again, it comes back to what I said earlier. How much worse could McAuliffe have done amongst those demos? And that's sort of like not knowing the risk reward, not knowing going in to the point of like, if you didn't know you're getting trounced in that group, then you couldn't work on shoring up. Okay, well, to
like look at some other demographics. Like, don't put all your eggs in one basket, or bastard, as it were. But like,
if you have to make that choice between the suburban moms and bringing out enough young people to counteract that, or enough. And again, it's not enough to say they should vote for civic duty. And if it's not, you need to make, but they weren't able to kind of make that calculated choice. They just sort of did the press a button automatic run on this is essentially no different than if he was running in 2017.
Yeah.
It felt like to me. So, if you can't make that different choice or try to figure out the risk reward, I mean, to me, you need to embrace, Republicans tend to embrace their base because they understand of like, I mean, Democrats don't do a great job about linking them to their extremists, but they get of like, oh, that's who our base is or whatever. We can't run from this. Although
weirdly, so many moderates have like Antifa in their like Twitter handles, and I'm like, do you know what Antifa is at all? And they're like, it means that you don't like fascism. And I'm like, true, but also
it also means this. Yes,
it also means the people that you don't like at all for any reason. Like,
it's very interesting. I mean, it's there to me have been building up in the suburbs pushback about a lot of COVID policy, the shutdowns, the schools, and I kind of saw that coming. And I'm just a guy, and when there was a lot of extreme for Democrats of like, we're shutting down schools, no schools for a while, which is really impactful for working moms, even suburban moms. Their kids around all the time, they were going crazy. And again, look, I get that there's you have to do what's safe, but to not be aware of the anger and the frustration at the shutdowns, the fact of like people losing their jobs, their fear, because Republicans are sweeping in and addressing that. Whereas again, I felt like there was a lecture, which is just like, well, stay. And I saw this a lot online of like, oh, so you just want teachers to be your nanny and take care of your kid, as if like, well, I can't work, the stress that I can't work.
No, obviously people want people to take care of their children.
Yes, that is a purpose of school. Like, there's a safe place to drop your child off for the work day. Like, our system does not work to homeschool and try to work. I my wife and I did some of it. It is I
have a lot of friends who did it, and they were like, this was terrible. And I
3 hours of sleep, and it's like, we were able to do that. My wife could do something of where she'd take the morning, I take the afternoon, and then
I totally don't understand when you sleep. Like, I think that you're like
it's like,
I really don't. Like, I'm like, when does Steven sleep? Because I'm not sure when it is. Like, you're up later than I am.
Yes.
And also up earlier than I am. And we live on different coasts.
It's a lot. It's a lot. It's been starting to get a bit back to normal. Schools back. We're getting some aftercare for Ellis. all of those infrastructures had kind of vanished. And so I think there was a lot
Mhm.
of anger there that, again, the action of like, why are you upset? Which again, I feel it happened again with the Rittenhouse case, that there's anger over this. Republicans were still exploiting the anger, even in a victory, but Democrats are telling us like, oh, well, either vote harder or this is how the system is supposed to work because we don't dare
I
acknowledge
think
critical
the thing is
race.
Democrats are afraid of anger. There's a fear there that like anger from the left is automatically repulsive. Also like um I mean, there are a lot of reasons why Obama was not allowed to get angry. Number one being that he was a black man and he, God forbid, couldn't be an angry black man, because then they would be scared. But there's a lot of terror over, oh no, if we appear angry, the nice white suburban ladies won't like us. And that was, sorry, I totally just screwed something up lighting wise.
That was wonderful. Robyn After Dark. I guess it's a weird, because what was the risk we just saw was that in this case, speaking softly and like everything's chill was
Yeah.
the worst way, because this demo was the most angry.
Yeah.
Super white ladies were the most angry from the schools or whatever. And I felt like the story, and you want to blame AOC, if you want to blame, the idea of like passing, and people had said this, if we'd only passed Biff earlier, which is insane. That's insane to me. I mean, it was proven wrong already because polling, there's no Biff bump because, well, people aren't feeling it. Also, that's not what they were angry about. That's not what they voted about. Like there's this disconnect of like this, if you see us doing all this good stuff or working hard or this, then we'll be popular. And it's not what things are popular about. And that's so it's hard to see how to win in that. And the time remaining, I wanted to ask you, because you'd written about International Men's Day, and it reminded me of on that day, there's Biden had gotten some routine surgery. He was on anesthesia.
Oh yeah, it was the whole like Kamala Harris was president for 35 minutes because Biden got a colonoscopy.
And it was very concerning to me because it's like, okay, well, there was that CNN article about the stuff internally.
I don't think anyone needs that image in their head. I'm sorry. Like, that's not like no one's being like, yay, woman president for 35 minutes. Everyone's thinking, oh my God, a colonoscopy. Like,
well, yes, exactly. And it just looked really bad to be kind of like, I'm really excited that someone might die because he's in a and he's 70. And to be frank, whenever you go under, it's not, there's always that's one of the greatest risks during surgery, actually, is going under. You can actually not come back. And when you're 78, like that return ticket is not always.
Next subject. Move on. Sorry, still dealing with some stuff.
Oh yeah, of course. But my sense of it just seemed very weird to be kind of like happy about that. Like it's just like someone's, and it just doesn't speak to, I don't know, there's this whole thing of like who would run again in either in 2024 or would it be?
I mean, I just saw today Biden is saying that he is planning on running again, which I guess he kind of has to say that at least. I don't know if that's his actual plan or not. But
said that he would run and then step down so she could become president in 2026. And I would think that's something someone would probably ask him. He's going to have to like say, I do intend to actually fulfill the whole term. I'm not going to. And I think it looks like very, Duke of Windsor. You can't abdicate as president. It looks kind of sketchy. But
although you can as the Pope.
Yes.
The Pope did that. Sorry.
He was chosen. I guess he checked with God. God was like, yeah, sure. Well, so, and it came up again because when I was writing about the CNN article and I said, it's tough that she's getting this media hit. It's unfair, but life is unfair.
Yeah.
And it seems like, I don't know, she doesn't even have the support from the areas that you would need to right now. That can change. It's very hard to change. That would allow to win. And something that came up that I found fascinating, because it seemed to sort of misinterpret what happened to me in 2020, at least, was
Hmm.
that, okay, well, it's going to be impossible for Buttigieg or any of these people to beat her, because she'll have the full support of the Black voters who helped save Biden's
Hmm.
candidacy. And I was like, well,
Yeah.
also Biden wasn't, as a white guy, as Scranton Joe, it felt like it was this, and I think you even wrote about this. It was like, no matter how badly he pulled, and then eventually losing two caucuses, predominantly white states, back to back, embarrassingly coming in third or fourth,
Yeah.
there was still an assumption that he would do well with white voters. And
Yeah.
that could only happen with
Like
him.
he didn't, yeah, no, he didn't have to prove, look at me doing really well with white voters. People were just like, that is what they want. They'll be happy with it. That's what they'll vote for.
So
But I also
if
think there was like a
go
general fear. I think there was a general fear that like I heard from a lot of people who really believed that like white voters ultimately would not come out for Bernie or Warren or like anyone else other than Biden, even though weirdly Biden probably did the worst among white voters. I think it was just like a lot of people were like, we just don't trust white people, and that's fair. But like that was an interesting
yes, it was
thing
the
that people
sense of,
said a lot.
I don't like, to me, as if the primary structure is where it is, I don't see a candidate who is not white losing two very white states or caucus,
Oh no, absolutely not. No.
then like have, even if it was Harris were to repeat this,
Oh
because
no,
with the
they would
current
just be like, oh well, whatever. It's because she's black, but like be like that's what absolutely would have been said.
yeah, and
Um,
so even if she were to come back and win in this scenario, because
mhm.
a lot would need to change for her to win in Iowa and New Hampshire, like a lot. I think if Buttigieg or Klobuchar, I mean, those states are kind of designed for those sort of candidates who to run. So if she were to then, I felt like this is sort of elephant in the room per se. They
Quite
stood down.
frankly, New Hampshire is too crazy for her. Like New Hampshire is a crazy place full of crazy people, and I say this as someone from Massachusetts originally. Like Kamala
Yeah.
Harris is way too normal for New Hampshire.
Well, so the perception is that they stood down
Yeah.
for Biden to
Yeah.
respect the vote, and which is flattering. That's so flattering. But I don't think that's actually what happened. What happened is that made it look that way, because
Yeah.
great, sort of we're
It
the
was a
underdog.
good narrative.
But Biden was running against Sanders, and there was, we had Carville and McCaskill and everyone peeing their pants that Sanders could win. Like after
Yeah.
New Hampshire and then Nevada,
Because
it
in
was
their
literally,
opinion, sorry,
yeah,
I've got like a
it was
weird
like a week of
cramp, but
scary. We wrote about that, right? Like the week of scariness when Chris
yeah.
Matthews, I think, had been like, "Oh my god," and you'd be like,
Well, like they went really hardcore, and people claimed that like, oh no, that never happened, and I'm like, oh my god, it was so fast. Like it was like all of a sudden it was like they like CNN went from like not covering Sanders at all to just being like, who is best friends with Fidel Castro? It is Bernie Sanders. They are in love, best friends forever. They have the necklaces and everything. And who will never vote for him is the Cubans in Florida who always vote Republican. They will never vote for him. They also didn't vote for Biden, but
we
at least
again,
they
I don't
like.
think it could have been worse. It probably would not have been worse. I mean, I don't know. I mean, Sanders probably could have lost as well. He could have tried campaigning there. That might have worked, but it was, I don't know what happened in Florida with us. But
Well, the whole Florida thing was like, oh no, like Sanders can't win there because of the Florida Cubans who always vote Republican, which I don't.
But Biden.
I don't understand why Democrats are still like, that's a demographic we can get. Like, I think they need to give up that particular dream.
No, I mean, Rubio's going to win. I mean, I don't know why don't we have, I mean, the best chance that I could possibly change and I get it bumped for this is like, why aren't we running then a someone of Cuban descent or Hispanic, or I mean, it's not all identity politics. Identity is also, like, it seems to me if I'm supposed to, politics is personal. So if I need to reach an Italian American community, I don't have experience in that community. But if I need to get like 90% of it, and people are human. I feel like there are people who with Obama, you got over 90% because I used the Colin Powell example. He worked for Bush. He voted for Bush. It's like, I want to give this guy a shot. And there's a reason. It was over John McCain, because it wasn't as clear as like Obama or someone like Trump who can't do the job. It was like, okay, I want to give this guy a shot. So it's like, if you're going to try, I mean, lean into it. But regardless, I think the idea to me that if Buttigieg carries Iowa, New Hampshire, and then Harris, wins South Carolina, his response is, so
it's going to be a whatever.
Yeah, he's going to keep going. And it's like, well, no, he won't run because he can't get the black vote. It's like, well, he will eventually, because it won't be enough. There's this to look at 2020 without the party feeling there was an existential threat if Sanders won, either that he would lose big or they just didn't want him winning. Either one is valid, but to me, that is not what, there is no sense. You're asking that would have to repeat itself in 2024 or 2028. And to me, it's like, I like Harris, and I know that a lot of K-Hive would be upset about this, but my sense is, okay, where is the coalition now that would get her Iowa and New Hampshire? Because other folks are going to go, they're going to see an opening, because right now, and we've let in all these never Trumpers, right? And they're a problem. They have a very vocal. So if Tim Miller, who used to work for Jeb, but Tim Miller is seen as a moderate voice of left. So if he's like, that Buttigieg guy's great, you're going to get Nicole Wallace saying that Buttigieg, you're going to get a lot of what to be able to be dismissed as, well, they're Republicans, even they're moderates, they're Republicans, but now they're never Trumpers, they're swing voters, and we would need them. He's going to grab those voters and not her, even though they tend to they don't like the squad. They don't like Harris, who's not, the squad, but they don't like her either. They don't like Cory Booker. They think he's done. They don't like Julianne Castro. So there's kind of
it's like it's almost like as if they all have a thing in common.
Yes. So they really like Spanish. Totally remember,
if I were a moderate, I would be all about Cory Booker. Personally, and yes, this is partially because I'm a deeply shallow human being, and I happen to think he is dishy, but that's who I'd be all about, because he's nice and personable, but also like weirdly this with the pharmaceutical companies, which means he's like off my list as far as.
He'd be fine. I think he is not as. Yeah, I mean, he doesn't get the misogyny that Harris gets, where there's sort of everything he does is calculating. I think they tend to like him, but then they also give him the sense of we don't think you are that bright, where they suddenly, if even though he is just as accredited as Buttigieg, but that happened a lot during the primaries, where they would focus on these credentials Buttigieg had, whereas Booker had the same ones, like he'd gone on elite schools or whatever. I think it is I mean, maybe there would be some sense of the left or whatever. Someone had asked, like, would Biden put his, if he's around, to put his force behind her? Who knows?
But I don't think that this is the thing. I feel like in 2020, like the Kamala people put their force behind Biden. I don't know, like, I don't know that Biden necessarily has a force so much as a, I guess, like, kind of thing. Like, people, I don't know that there are, I mean, I guess they exist, and that there are some people who are like, yes, this is specifically what I am into personally. But it didn't really, it seemed like he was sort of everyone's like, well, I guess.
Exactly.
Like,
and I think
he's not Trump.
Yes. And I think in 20, there's no strategy of how, because I mentioned, some Rick Wilson at the Lincoln Project had wanted to defeat, we need to get behind Trump to defeat.
Oh yeah, no, I saw that. Jesus Christ.
And
like,
sort of like,
let's all repeat our same mistakes over and over again. Why not?
You guys did that before with Hillary. Like, Trump is not easier to beat than anyone. He's actually pretty successful at certain things. And even if he wasn't, it's like, I don't want to make that gamble. He's a deranged psychopath. And then someone's like, well, DeSantis is just as bad and whatever. And beyond, I don't think that he is, at that level of supervillainy as Trump. But if that is true, and this comes back to this, right? If that is true, why don't Democrats talk as if that is the case? That every Republican, even your nice little Adam Kinzinger, all of them are bad actors. All of them would support the Texas Bounty Hunter Fugitive Slave Womb Act against women. People get pregnant. This is what.
That's what they're into.
Like Mitt Romney would have nominated Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, and he would have put in, and Betsy DeVos would have been put in by Jeb. Like, these are all bad actors, so you need to talk like that's the case. And I think we've gotten removed from it. I think the Republicans are very focused on the fact that for them there is no fundamental difference. The Democratic Party should not govern. It is a communist party. There's no fundamental difference between AOC, Pelosi, and Schumer. They are all communists. That is their message. It is very focused. And we love them.
Pretend like the right doesn't hate Nancy Pelosi, but they really hate Nancy Pelosi, like more so, like a lot. They do not care for her.
Well, Connor Lamb, I mentioned that, and that was inconvenient because when people were like, how dare, Connor Lamb didn't protest vote for that BIF Act. And it's like, oh, well, he also protest voted against Nancy Pelosi for speaker. He did not vote for her twice because that's what he told his, suburban constituents. But somehow she's the face of evil. So I think the focus has to be, if you think, because what happens is you get Glenn Youngkin, right? Like, when I pointed out that Pelosi shouldn't wish that we had a good Republican Party because we have enough problems with Joe Manchin. And like, don't we have conservatives? We have Lamb, we have conservatives within our party. We don't need the GOP. It's like, well, you have to say that. It's like, okay, well, what does a strong party look like? Like, a strong party loses. And if you're saying, a strong party wins, like, we would look like, if you're saying that it's an existential crisis whenever Republicans win, but like George W. Bush, and that they still won't give up the Nader cross on that was an existential threat. And like 2004 was terrible. And then 2016 say, okay, well, when was it okay for Republicans to win? And if it's not, and I don't necessarily agree with this either, if it's not, then you need to, why do we need a strong, like, what? But I think you've spoken to that as well, like, right? Like, why they have this need.
Well, it's like they think it's like, this is the like gracious thing to say if you have like the proper manners and what have you. I'm not really good at that accent, I guess. But like, I think that's like the idea, like that's what you're supposed to say because it's gracious, and they don't necessarily mean it. I don't think they really mean it. I think they think it's like, after you, madame. Like, I think that's really like more what it is than anything else. And I don't think that is necessarily a good tactic, because as I think the Republican Party has made clear, they're not actually all that into etiquette. They're not Karen from Real Housewives of Potomac. Like, they're not like,
Yes.
you have to leave now.
It's like if we're roommates, there's rules. It's understood that like we follow those same rules, and it's like, oh, and it's like a car we share. So the country is the control of the nation is a car we share, and it's like, okay, well, Robyn had it this week, and now I have it. Except now I have it, and I'm never going to give it back to you, and I'm going to have your driver's license revoked. Is like, okay, I probably should never share with Steven. He's very bad about that. And so that's kind of what they're doing, the gerrymandering and all this. So it's like, and that is that viewpoint, right? Because it's still a view from people who aren't as engaged, who haven't as fundamentally communicated that threat, that everything good that Democrats have done will get, it's not like you get another chance, like they will set fire to it. So in Virginia, it was like, oh, wow, we had this trifecta of overtly positive things were done. I did a review of the AV Club of HBO's Black and Missing, and there was a gentleman who was unfairly imprisoned, a corrupt cop who just was lying about his stops or whatever. It was a progressive in Fairfax County, a progressive prosecutor made it a point to get this kid out. To get him, really not a kid, but a man. Get him.
I haven't seen that yet. I will have to watch it.
Definitely, and the reason I mentioned that is to back up to that, because what stood out to me while watching it, because it was shortly after the election, was that Tom Cotton was like, "Oh, well, we now have both the governor and the attorney general, both Republicans, have made a point of saying we're going to shut down that liberal if they aren't following the law." We're going to come in. So they're going to come in on prosecutors who they believe are too lenient or too kind. Obviously, Kyle Rittenhouse's will not apply.
Which is like, man, it's really hard to find prosecutors who are too lenient or too kind, in my opinion.
So
I don't like prosecutors.
And that's like one human element of like, this is, beyond the bullshit about the schools or whatever. This red wave in Virginia, that's human lives.
Yeah.
Who else could be in prison that a prosecutor could like bother to do the research in and say, oh, our office screwed this up. This is wrong. I have an obligation to release them. Now it's like, why would I bother? Especially because the governor and the attorney general is like, oh, no, releasing Black people, even if he's somewhat, why would I ever do that? So there's never a good when they get into power. I think people in Virginia thought like, okay, well, let's give the other guys a shot now, because we are not effectively saying these people are bad actors. They should never be in power.
And I also think that like, there's with the whole like, we are very proper ladies and gentlemen thing, there is a missed opportunity to go after like more like just human concerns. Because like when you're like, the whole like we're very proper and we say and do the right things always thing is not it makes it very difficult to relate to other human beings, I think. And I don't, so, and the disappointing thing is like Democrats have a lot of like very human concerns, like that is very like, a lot more than Republicans do, quite frankly. Like we can say like, hey, you probably really need childcare. We would like to get that for you. We would like you to like have health care and not worry about that, and not worry about all the things that you're freaking out about in the middle of the night, And instead of doing that, a lot of them are like, I don't know what people with like really good manners say, but like, something like, pardonnez-moi, do you have any grateful qualities?
It's about being very polite, everything is ordered. And the extent of where things get angry is again over the anger. So Spangler is like, again, I bring her up because it's almost comical, right? We didn't elect someone to be one of the most transformative popular
Mhm.
president of all time, who was literally they had to pass an amendment because he kept getting
Yeah, because they would have kept reelecting him. Yes.
we don't that who wants that? And then the idea of like we're just here to be seat warmers is not a particularly
Mhm.
compelling. We're not here to make any fundamental change or to do anything. And when we talk about change or Carvel, whatever, whenever they get close to any sort of anger, it's about as if who are they angry at? It seems like they're angry at the constituents or their voters or people of
Because
color. Because you
they're
talk
not
about
falling in
wokeness,
line the right way.
the woke, like when they say there's too much wokeness, where is that in the party? Like AOC isn't in control of the party.
Yeah.
Arguably, she's not in control in any way.
Well, no, they want to blame it on the activists on Twitter, but like a very small amount of the population is actually on Twitter. Like,
no,
it's not like most people are not me and you. Like,
there's not the wokeness. It's not Pelosi. It's not Schumer.
No.
Who are they talking about? Who's in control? Who is the woke person on McCullough's
Well,
campaign?
no, what it is they're playing the game that Republicans set up the game, said what the game is. They said, we are scared of the woke mob. This is who we don't like right now. And we're going to constantly talk and, reaffirm that and talk about the woke mob like it's this like big giant threat. And then Democrats then go, well, we better get our act together and like eliminate this whole woke mob problem. But really, it's something that like Republicans made up. Like they made up their own definition of like critical race theory. They just keep making and cultural Marxism. They just keep making shit up, getting mad about it. And like Democrats are like, well, we will take care of that, sir.
Well, and the anger is a lot of about things that have already occurred, like you've already done, so that didn't happen, like this woke mob or whatever. And
it's imaginary.
And you talk about the manners. I think it's also again the institutionalism, this fear, of course, that if we got rid of the filibuster, that suburbanites would care. They don't, or the idea that our institutions, or it was like obviously people care that Steve Bannon ignored a subpoena. Obviously, they care that Trump had a bad phone call. With you're not communicating that in areas that average people get. They're like, what?
Yeah. Literally, no one cares if someone ignores a subpoena. Like that's not any. Like there are like 12 people that care, and they're all on television talking about how much they care about Steve Bannon ignoring a subpoena. Like
nothing. Not you called them Pumas, I believe, but there were a lot of people who would fall in that category. Who was like, if Trump fires Mueller, we're going to take to the streets. It's like, lady, do you know how many Black kids got shot last? Like, so that's not getting your pumps dirty worthy.
Yeah.
But firing like this, like really, you're going to take the streets for that? Like that's what's going to escalate. So
that is the end of the line, sir.
Which I don't think. And again, I think we need to what is everyone angry about and what is the threat? I think part of the narrative for January 6th should have been here's where this threat, and not so much about our democracy or these highfalutin terms, because for one, there's a schism between how I would say white liberals, pundits, and myself view this, because there's a sense of, oh my God, democracy will end. It's like, when did it exist? And then it'll be like 1984 or Handmaid's Tale. It's like, or it could be like 1950. Like, my dystopian novel is my grandfather.
I was personally felt like The Handmaid's Tale was a really bad, like I liked the book. I read it in high school and everything, but like I feel like not everyone read that book or watched like the Prestige Hulu series on it, and like it always struck me as very kind of like, here is a book that white ladies read in college. Let's like then base our protests off of the bell jar, or I don't know.
Yeah, I mean it is
like that is a very specific audience, I think, for that.
It just seems so weird to me. Like, and I'm
not
to your line. I mean, I don't fine, show up like one of the handmaids, but you're making it as if this is a fictional possibility that could happen based on science fiction, as opposed
Yeah.
to what
Like
life
it's
was like.
literally happening right now to your uterus.
Well,
Like that is an actual real threat. No one's out there trying to make you wear outfits, as far as we know, just yet. But they are trying to get your neighbor to call the police on your
but if you were
uterus.
20 years older, you couldn't have gotten, like 20 or 30 years older, you couldn't have gotten a credit card
Yeah.
without your, like, this is not ancient history, or like the
Mhm.
50s, we're talking about Rosa Parks. So just like
No, that was in the 70s. Like women could not have.
the world, like this is what's happening is, and because what the view is that, okay, well, if there's like the Handmaid's Tale, or if it's like if there's someone building a freaking Death Star, clearly
Yeah.
we're gonna all revolt from this, right? It's like, well, no, it's kind of like, I feel
Except not.
like the
Those people
worst
say
period of time,
the Handmaid's Tale, and they're like, "Don't threaten me with a good time." Like,
or to me, it's like the worst part of history for Black people. White people seem to be just fine. They have
yeah,
plantation parties, or they have like, Gatsby parties. And it's like, well, things weren't great for us during the 20s. It's like,
yeah, no,
I love the Charleston, but like, I love Chicago. I love 20s stuff, but like, that wasn't a great time to be a Black person. And that couldn't happen. And you were okay. Your answers were okay with it. I'm not
yeah.
dissing grandparents. I'm just saying they were fine. So someone had asked, I guess this will be our last question for we move on, but any opinion on cancel culture? At my sense, I feel like that's another Republican,
Yeah.
as you were saying, the Republican term of
Mel Gibson is doing a new movie. It doesn't exist. It People have gone away for like 80 bajillion different reasons, like since forever, for like all kinds of things. If you actually like look at like media history, people have made all kinds of mistakes and like lost their career over said mistakes. And the idea that like people are specifically getting canceled by the woke mob is not actually happening. You can't name one person. The only person people can name is Kramer, and people were talking about that the other day. But for the most part, when people have like are a character like Kramer from Seinfeld, they don't usually have like a further career after that, because they're always associated. Like there are other reasons why Kramer did not have a career after his racial outbursts, other than he was super racist. Like
drastically different.
What was he doing before then?
And it wasn't drastically different from what happened to Jason Alexander and others. I mean, and I think what was interesting there is that he apologized. He still he went around the clubs. I apologized. I was wrong. As opposed to a lot of what we see of cancel culture, it's just like, well, why shouldn't I yell at some Black people and call them the N-word? That is my art. I should not. I should be able to express myself with no accountability, which is a very kind of that sort of reverse kind of counterculture thing, council culture thing, or the sense of like everyone saying, "Oh, you couldn't make this movie now," like Blazing Saddles. Like, well, I'm sure you could. And there's many reasons why you would. It's like,
literally no one has ever complained about Blazing Saddles. I've been like, no one is mad at it.
Well, I think what happens is they proactively state this would not air today. It's happened before. Like there did Fox, when the Fox network did like a 25th anniversary of whatever. They were like Married at Children and Living Color. Neither of these shows could exist today. And it's just like, well, they were very much of their times, not in a bad way. And I use that because I don't like that term. I'm talking about very reflective of their times. So things change. So yes, it wouldn't
But
exist.
things have always changed. When they aired Duck Soup in like the 1970s, they took out a particularly racist joke from that, like, you know, the one I'm speaking of.
Yes.
The Headstrongs married the Armstrongs one.
Well,
which is horrifying. But like that was eliminated from programming back then because they were like, you know what, little much.
Well, what is interesting, you bring that up. I saw that in college. I've seen it before, but I've seen Duck Soup a few times in a theater. and each
Mhm.
time it was unedited, and the audience, this is a pre-cancel culture audience, this is the 90s, it
Yeah.
stopped the theater cold.
Yeah.
And to me, it's not what you want. It's like, why are you, what would, to me, it's like, and when I do plays and we have previews, oh, this joke stops the audience cold. I thought it was
Yeah.
funny. Apparently it's not. It's not going to survive previews because
Mhm.
I'm embarrassing the actors by having them say this. So you take it out. And so that's kind of like in a movie, especially it's like certain times in a movie, it's like I want people to like the Robyn character. So
Yeah.
here's a fun moment when we're introducing her. Maybe 50 years ago would be you're doing something that but now it's like, oh, that's kind of mean and racist. Oh, I
Yeah.
don't like that. I that I'm not necessarily endearing with you because of the transphobic remark or the
And
fat
that's
shaming.
human. It's human. People like, you
We
know,
change. What is
yeah,
fun
we
change.
change and we evolve. And like, there are so many. I mean, you and I both watch a lot of classic movies, and we can both appreciate those movies without like, and be like, at the same time, not great here. Like, this is bad.
But I do think that's what like Seinfeld and Chris Rock, others who are certain age, they really do believe there's this concept that at these colleges, the students want to laugh, but they don't. And
Yeah.
it's penis. That's what Bill Maher and others, I think, fundamentally
Yeah.
believe, as opposed to just like, I just don't find this funny because your
Well,
experiences
I
are
personally think
different.
everyone is madly in love with me, but is just afraid to say it. They're like, Robyn is the absolute most stunning creature on this planet, but I am afraid to say that. I'm terrified because of cancel culture.
Yeah, exactly. I think none of us are afraid to admit how awesome you are, Robyn. So
Yes.
on that note, um, we will, I will probably have some sort of fun post Thanksgiving post for Sunday, but otherwise we're not going to be around and you'll be
Yeah,
off
no, not too much.
carving
I
the
mean,
turkey.
I'm gonna write something up tonight, but also, I mean, my primary focus this evening is on Real Housewives of Salt Lake City because I have some opinions on who ratted out Jen Shaw. I'm very excited. Like, I'm actually going to be watching it online with our friend Claire and some other people,
Oh,
and we're
cool.
very excited. It's a very exciting episode. We think.
Awesome. All right. Well, happy early Thanksgiving, Robyn. I'm sure.
Happy early Thanksgiving to you. All right.
Thank you, and happy everything to everyone else.
Bye.